Are you a service-based business owner looking to increase profits to fund your lifestyle? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Great to have you here. If you're a first-time listener, if you love the experience, please subscribe. If you're a regular, I'd love to get your feedback. You are fine to take notes, but all of the show is fully transcribed and is on the website at the end of the show. Our guest today had his start in music, was in a rock band, played guitar, and also worked in the hip hop environment, was a radio presenter, etc. And then he, went into sales. He went into an account management. But around the time that we all read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, he did, and with some friends decided that he'd go out on his own in 2014. And what you're going to learn on this show is how to build relationships using cold email. That's right, relationships with cold email. He's got some very unique ways of doing it. And I learned a lot from that, and I'm sure you will as well. Also, how can you benefit from a fractional business development person, and also when to sequence your content. Okay, it's really important, and he gives some great examples of that. So now what I'll do is hand you over to Dan Englander from Sales Schema. Welcome, Dan Englander from Sales Schema, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Great to have you here, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so look, we met, I think it was back in July of 2020, so it's been a little bit of time between meeting, but I loved your story then. I love how you help a certain type of client, which we'll talk about more in a moment, which I love to work with as well. But why don't we kick off with something that your family or friends know about you that we may not?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things, and probably things that are more embarrassing than this. But I think the biggest one is just I have a background in music. The guitar, I guess, in the background is now public, so now this seems less private. But I grew up playing in bands and stuff, and I think that kind of was my first drive, was wanting to do something with music. And I went to college, I remember, because I thought there'd be a music scene there. I went to UC Santa Cruz out in, near San Francisco, and I did college radio and stuff. So for some reason that was always the first thing I was into. And I think it's kind of informed, now that I think about it, maybe subconsciously it's informed a lot of my decisions in terms of not wanting to be in a job or going to an office or something, even though I'd never ended up a musician. I think there's probably something to that. And that's something that, friends and family are familiar with that most people aren't.
Now is, another little secret. Did you start off doing some hip hop, or was that, I saw that on your LinkedIn profile?
Yeah.
So was it music and dance?
I was never a hip hop guy. Like I never made hip hop music. I played guitar and was into rock, but I was a fan, and I hosted a hip hop radio show on the college radio station KZSC at Santa Cruz, and became the hip hop director and interviewed a lot of rappers and stuff in the Bay Area. So I was a fan then. I feel like I'm out of the loop now, though. Like I don't know what's going on. I think like Kendrick Lamar was like the last current artist that I'm a fan of, that I know about. So I feel old now comparatively. Yeah.
And like you said, you had some account management roles, and then moved in, I think it was about 6 years ago, just over 6 years ago, into Sales Schema. But why don't you just tell us a little bit about that transition, like you said, from the music that inspired you to always do something yourself. But what did you learn in the account management roles, and then why do it yourself?
Yeah. So basically, like the long story short was I moved to New York in like 2010 and worked at an ad agency, because I think like if you don't know what you're going to do and you're in New York, you kind of just fall into the trash bin of the agency world. So I was in an accounts job there, and worked on some bigger consumer accounts, and I did some interesting creative works, a lot of grunt work, a lot of answering various problems on Facebook walls. This is kind of the relatively early days of social media, being used by brands and stuff. And then from there, kind of fell into a slightly smaller agency gig, where I was kind of a split accounts sales role, where I was kind of shuffling back and forth between sales and client service, and then learned a lot from that. And then, basically got exposed to, in a very, very like cliche fashion, got exposed to 4-hour work week and all that good stuff, and various friends that were doing side gigs and side hustles and self-publishing and all that. And then around about 2014, quit my job, traveled Asia for a while with my girlfriend at the time, and started Sales Schema basically. And it's evolved, since then. But basically, where we're at now, for those that don't know us, we're an outsourced new business team focusing on the agency space, basically. Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll definitely dig into that more, because I know it's something that is very topical. I get asked about that all the time. So I can't wait to dig into that. And who have been some of your biggest supporters through this journey, particularly, running your own business?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's people all over the place. So definitely, our clients and prospects and people we talk to. I think that's one of the things that I love about this business, is that we're usually dealing with entrepreneurs, with other business owners, or people that are, in leadership positions in companies. So I definitely learn a lot and get a lot of support from the people that we're doing business with. And beyond that, I'm lucky enough to have a pretty close knit cadre of people that, in like a mastermind group that I've had, man, 5 years now. So some of my best friends are in that group, and we see each other all the time. A couple of them, we do Brazilian jiu-jitsu together under normal circumstances. And they own similar businesses. My buddies, Jan Roos and Nate Smith, for example, and others. My old boss, Will Gadea, who owns Idea Rocket, which is an animation studio, kind of selling into enterprise, has been really helpful. And there's probably others that I'm regrettably forgetting, but I think that, to digress a little, I think that there's more of this sort of like squad based thing, where there's a lot of different voices that come in and out, but I kind of keep circling back to the same people. And we've all had lots of ups and downs, where one of our businesses is killing it and then down the next month and everything. So I think that's definitely been useful to me. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think that's so important. I've been in lots of masterminds, but look, mainly paid, and I've also been in some non-paid. But I think it's so important. And just, often when someone will say something, it'll just make me think. So it might never be on the topic, but it just makes me think of something different. And that's certainly what I miss about corporate. Like, corporate used to be in those meetings all the time, bouncing off ideas, and it can be very lonely running your own business. As like you and I, you've got a team, but often I'm by myself, and I'm the one who's got to come up with all the ideas. So it's great to bounce them off. So we'll move into the next section, which is the build section. So when people say, "Hey, Dan, what do you do for a living?" How do you best describe that?
Yeah, I basically say, we create relationships for our clients. We open doors, we keep the pipeline full. We basically are an outsourced sales team, for our clients. And I think that what that entails, to get tangible, is doing outreach in a way that's tasteful and effective to create new relationships. Because one of the most common things that I hear is, we are a relationship driven business, and I think that's great, but the relationship has to start somewhere. And that's what we're looking to do, is basically make that happen at scale. And I think that, especially now, and it's definitely been a trend towards this direction. And then with the whole world going digital, it's not about like making that part of the arsenal. It kind of really is the only option, or at least one that has to be part of the mix, in terms of figuring out how you would build those new relationships digitally. That's what we're really good at.
Yeah, look, I think it's so true, isn't it? I've had so many people approach me because they've said, look, just my referral base has dried up. It used to be from a lot of offline things, networks, those type of things. And, and certainly when, business is tough too, you don't often, naturally think of referring other people, right? You go to protect yourself, and not because you want to, but sometimes because you have to. So yeah, I think moving to digital is so important. So what do you know about outreach on digital that many people miss?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest one is basically keeping up with the consistency of it, and kind of like understanding that and not overcomplicating it. I think that's one of the biggest things that we see is this idea that we need to be everywhere. We need to be on a million different channels to make things work. And I think that it really makes the process a lot more unwieldy for people. So I think bringing it back to first principles, it's the idea that, the referrals and all that stuff, we used to kind of like beat up referrals and say, yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough to sustain your business. But the answer is just because, the organic sporadic referral might not be sustainable doesn't mean that you can't recreate that same sort of validation by doing outreach the right way. Right. So what that means is that instead of just contacting somebody that you have no connection with, to try to get them to have a meeting with you, and I think it's more about identifying the sorts of people that will have a meeting with you based on a number of different commonalities, right? Something you might have in common with them. So that's the sort of sea change that we've taken in our approach because of what we've seen happen, in the agency space. But I think it's just a microcosm of the business world in general, which is that there's a lot more people out there, especially in a digital agency world where almost anybody can start an agency. So there's more literal competition, but there's also more macro overall competition for attention. So it's one of these situations where even if you have all the bona fides, even if your agency has great work, and I want this to be bigger than the agency world, even if your company has all the check boxes and you're reaching out to the right person, it may not be enough to consistently or reliably get those doors open. So then the question becomes, what's the next best option? And again, back to what I said earlier, it's going to be about identifying and reaching out to the people that will talk to you. So for example, what to get tangible, what that means for us is instead of thinking about, okay, what can we build our clients a bunch of beautiful case studies or build these funnels where we're contacting people all over the place and saying, hey, Mrs. CMO, like talk to us, look how awesome we are. It's more about figuring out, okay, what if we were to identify all the C-level people, in Brisbane, Australia, and I forgot what city you're in. I know you're in Oz though.
Yeah.
That went to the same college as Paul, right? And also are in the right industries where the Paul can serve really well, and also are in the right company sizes. And we said, hey, I went to the same college as you. I think you're doing really good work. I'd love to see how we can help each other. That's now a situation where we're going to be booking 5, 10, 20 meetings a week, and our clients are going to be closing, millions in lifetime revenue by having that sort of consistency. So that's, we're doing it in a very sophisticated way at scale and everything. But even if you never hire us or you don't feel like you can do that, I think taking steps in that direction and kind of thinking, about almost these evolutionary cues that we have, right? We tend to think very tribally, and we want to talk to people that we feel like are in our world and so on, in some shape or fashion, whether it's business or personal or some combination of the two. So I think starting from that barometer is a much better way to do outreach, and also doing it tastefully, doing it not coming in as much of a hard sell. There's exceptions though, but that's kind of how we are thinking about it these days. And maybe that will
Right.
change.
And is that predominantly on LinkedIn, or do you apply the same thing? LinkedIn, email, like what's your key channels of building that relationship?
Yeah. So we are using email these days, but I think, and I think the channel matters. I think it, in some ways, which I'll get into, and I think it doesn't matter as much in other ways. I think the thing that makes this work is that connection, that commonality. And sometimes like there's exceptions to this. You might not need to bring a bazooka to a knife fight. Like if you're selling Amazon services right now and you really understand Amazon, there's precious few people that do that. You might not need to be this sophisticated. You might be able to say, look, but in a skeptical market, which is most markets after a while, then you need to come with something that is with a greater connection. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're able to have that connection with somebody, the channel doesn't matter as much. It could be LinkedIn, it could be email, etc. That said, these channels have idiosyncrasies. I think that LinkedIn has gotten to a stage where everybody can do it, right? Everybody can pull the same data. Everybody can go buy Sales Navigator for $80 a month and contact the exact same CMO with a few clicks. It doesn't take a lot of sophistication to do that. So as a result, LinkedIn's become a very spammy, very noisy place. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. There's a way to use it correctly. So I'm not saying LinkedIn's dead or anything, and but I think that's something to keep in mind. And the other thing is that all these platforms, outside of a list that you own, outside of your own audience, are subject to platform risk. And we've seen this happen over and over again, right? So that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take that risk. It just means that you also should probably be building a long-term asset that you own. And in my opinion, I think email is anti-fragile in this way, to use Taleb parlance. I think that as other channels have come and gone and changed their policies, email is something that is a protocol that nobody really owns. And yes, Google and Outlook can change their filters and make it harder to use, right? Which has been great for us because it means there's less people trying to do it well. It's ultimately something that can only be controlled to an extent, because ultimately we all need to get emails from people we do not know. We all need to get newsletters. It's only going to be able to be controlled to an extent. So that's why we're big believers in email. Other reasons include the fact that it's where we do business. We plan things in email. LinkedIn, social media channels, not as much. You're perusing, you're looking at products or whatever. So I am still a big fan of email for that reason. I just think it has gotten harder to do well, for good reason. And as a result, we have less spam, which is good. So
Yeah. So are you using LinkedIn as more of your research tool, and then you're actually communicating directly with people on email? Is that the way that you're using LinkedIn more?
well, we're using it in a variety of different ways, but again, it's the way that we're using LinkedIn these days tends to be more about identifying commonalities, right? So they might be identifying, mutual friends, secondary networks, and that sort of thing. And then, but still, we're these days primarily using email as the channel. But there's exceptions. There's ways these things can play together. But what we're always trying to do is avoid what everybody else is doing, and that's the key to making this work, is that pattern interrupt. And so when somebody gets a message, they're saying, okay, this is different. This isn't like the last 5 pitches that I've gotten. And the most common way that this plays out is people won't know why they respond. I can't tell you how many responses we get that say, this seems different. I know I never respond to these, but something's different about this. And yeah, well, let's take some time to talk. And that's what we're going for.
So give us a bit of that secret sauce. Like what's the subject header look like? Just take us through an example of what an email typically looks like for you.
Yeah, there is no one way to do it. And I'm sorry to be coy, but there just isn't. It really depends on the market and who we're selling to and a million different things. The secret sauce, though, I mean, the closest thing we have to that, again, is back to that commonality. What is that actual connection? Are there friends in common? We have campaigns going right now where we've said, okay, XYZ agency has worked for Nike, or rather they have Nike as a client. Like, what if we identify all the CM or all the people that used to work for Nike that are now in marketing departments and other companies, and we say, hey, we've done a lot of work with Nike in the past. I saw you were here. Can we make some time to connect? We're doing this, that, and the third. Can we talk? That's the secret sauce, is figuring out how to do that data, how to build out that data at scale and do that. And that's the hard part, and that's where the secrets live, and that's what we're really good at. And even if I said them, it'd be hard to do. But that's the main thing, is even if you never hire us, I think if you start thinking in terms of commonalities and identifying the people that are actually likely to talk to you, and kind of get rid of this idea of creating really complex funnels and all that stuff matters. The case studies, the proposals, all that stuff is important, but it's not important at the top of the funnel. It's important at the bottom of the funnel. So you're not going to be able to test the stuff at the bottom of the funnel if there's nothing coming into the top. It all just becomes speculative, and that's the biggest thing that we see people waste. Maybe not the biggest. One of the biggest things we see people wasting time on is all of this hand wringing about collateral and materials and positioning and the website, and all the website's a little different, I guess, but and all this other stuff, without having a tangible way to test it, so that's why everything has to start with the top of the funnel, basically. Yep.
Yeah. And I suppose that, the older bar analogy comes into play, where you don't, walk into a bar and then ask someone, probing questions straight away. You're building that relationship first. So it sounds like you're doing that. You're doing it through, like you said, some mutual connection. As far as the platform you're using, so what I know you guys do it at scale, like you said, but if I'm, what sort of platforms are you using? What works best? It's something that is, definitely not an unsubscribe on the email, etc. Any tips there?
Yeah, we have our own proprietary systems and stuff at this point, but yeah, I think the main thing is that the idea is that each person you're reaching out to is thinking that you've written them a custom email, because you kind of have. Okay, it's not one to one, but it's you've identified a connection, and you are being specific with it. So again, yeah, you don't want to use a MailChimp. You don't want to have like unsubscribe links and all that stuff. And for the record, everything we do is in compliance with all the regulations with can spam in the US and so on. So that the main thing is that you have a signature with an address and all that stuff. But that's the most important thing, is whatever system you use. And there's a whole lot. There's one called there's Limbless, there's Airborne app, which is a really great one for teams, by my buddy Lee Gladish. There's others like that are made for outreach. The biggest heavyweight one is outreach.io, and that's probably like the aircraft carrier of outbound. So there's a lot of different systems to choose from.
Yeah. Look, I use a sales CRM called Copper. Integrates beautifully with Gmail. And the great thing with that, you can send up to 2,000 bulk emails a day. So you can, select people, send them message, which can be, like you said, it's semi personal. It's not directly to them, but it's got a theme, and but it comes straight from your Gmail account. So if you got the capability in your sales CRM, that's great. So just flip to the agency owner at the moment, right? So
Sure.
I'm an agency owner. I'm listening to this at the moment, and I'm thinking, look, I need to bring in a salesperson. I don't know if I need someone full time. And you talked before about fractional business development. Just take us a little bit through what clients that works really well for.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the first thing is kind of identifying the stuff that you're never going to be able to do out of house, or maybe not never say never, but it'll be very difficult to do out of house. And I think the main one is getting on calls and having a complex conversation and building that relationship, right? Like the relationship building, the whole point of relationship building is it can't really be outsourced, once you actually have a discourse like we have right now, right? So that's the main thing. But beyond that, I think what does work really well is opening those doors and taking care of top of the funnel. And this shouldn't seem that crazy, because pretty much that's what every agency does for their clients, right? You're hired by a brand to go out and get them new customers, create awareness, create conversions, et cetera. It's just that, but done in a B2B context. So that's how we're thinking about fractional new business. Is there's a demarcation, there's clear things, there's things that we can consult clients on and say, hey, you should do this differently, but we're never going to be able to get on the call and close deals. That said, what we are really good at is opening those doors. And to answer your question, for us, we tend to be a good fit once an agency is has product service fit. They have one to a few verticals that they feel really confident about, that they know they can close deals in. Because ultimately, we don't really want to work with anybody unless we know they can get a massive return on the investment. So if somebody's testing something, that's great, as long as we both know that going in. But typically, we're working with agencies at I'd say roughly the 10 to 200 employee range, maybe a little bit above there, give or take. So to answer the question more, I think that for what we do, it tends to be a good fit for agencies where there's either an owner or a dedicated new business person that can get on 10 to 20 calls a week to close a deal. And that sounds like a lot, but each one's a half hour. That's, a few hours, and so on from there. So it's basically agencies that, are looking to grow, that are willing to put in that time and manage a sales process and so on. And I think, and honestly, like I think there's other channels that work really well. I think inbound can work. I'm not saying that what we do is the only option, but I think that what we've seen not work are kind of agencies that that don't know, that aren't ready to put in that time yet. We hear a lot of, hey, we're really busy with projects and we've got these active RFPs, but we know we really need to invest in ourselves and build a sales process and a sales funnel and all this stuff, where it's sort of like, okay, you have those 3 RFPs right now, but those are going to go away. And if you don't win them, you don't win enough of them, you're not going to be able to rely on those happening again. So at some point, you got to have somebody that's willing to get on sales calls, hear a lot of no's, hear a small percentage of yeses, and build that process and get to those numbers. So that's ultimately what we're looking for, people that kind of get it, to get that that's the process,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to win business
And
scalably. Yeah.
and the is there any video? So I know that I've been testing doing, and this is more personal, right? More custom, but finding people on LinkedIn and then sending them a personal video, a minute, etc., introducing myself. Is that something that you've seen work, not work? I know you do custom, but yeah, how does video start to play in email outreach?
Yeah, it's a great question, and to be honest, we're not super adept at it. We're what we're really good at is the data and in running these campaigns at scale and that sort of thing. But we've had clients do that really well. I think it can really be useful. I would just say that you kind of want a system whereby you're not taking on too much time based risk, so you might not want to be making a custom. If it were me doing it, I'm just kind of spitballing here, I'd be thinking about like, okay, maybe once somebody's opened but hasn't responded, then that's when I'm going to make a personalized email, because that way I know I have proof of life before I put in those 5-10 minutes or whatever. So that's kind of the way I would think about it. But yeah, I think I've heard it works great. It makes perfect sense that it would be really effective. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, as a quick example, you send in the connection request, you say that you're going to send a personal video. Then, you get their email, and you let them know that this is how you found their email, etc. Right? So you're being completely transparent while you're reaching out. And then before you send the video, then you'd send them an email saying, we connected on LinkedIn. I said I was going to do that. Are you still open to receiving a video? And then that's a proof point, I suppose, to say, okay, it's validated. Now, there are some ways that you can use, different, do videos with all the common names, and then you can send them
Yeah.
out. So there's other ways of doing it. But yeah, I think that's worked really well. Brilliant. And I did have one other question, but it just escaped me. But why don't we now move into the live section? And before we do that, I'd like to talk about how you can build repeatable sales outside of referrals. So Dan's doing a brilliant job on agencies, but if you're a low 7-figure business and you want to get more sales outside of referrals, just go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/sales. So you'll learn the 3 steps to deliver repeatable sales in my free masterclass. The 3 key steps is 1, the sales funnel. So like Dan said, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but that's one key thing. The second is lead generation. So a lot of the great tips that Dan's already mentioned. And the third thing is one-to-many sales, which I think is often the tool that's not used the most. So on the 17th of Feb, 2021, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when the live webinar is on. So go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/sales. So as I said, the next section is the live section, Dan. And what are some daily habits that help you be successful?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I'm not always good, but when I am being good, I like to do a lot of the deep work, a lot of the kind of like resistance heavy work first thing in the morning, and I think that's just when I'm most productive. So I try to avoid anything admin related, until kind of like later in the afternoon, till I'm brain dead. And that's when filling out forms and that sort of thing comes into play. So that's the biggest one, and I think for me that's meant not checking email until I've taken care of that task, and then figuring out the top 3 tasks the previous day, when I've done that journaling. I think beyond that, I think a big thing is just kind of understanding what's going on the ground. So you kind of have this lofty high level view, and then you have kind of getting into the weeds and figuring out, okay, what's actually happening in our clients' accounts, what meetings have come in overnight or in the last 24 hours, when are the next meetings with clients scheduled, and that sort of thing, and just kind of taking stock. And that's, probably coming in the middle of the day a little bit more. And then beyond that, I think just a consistent journaling practice is really helpful, just for a lot of different reasons, for planning and for emotional health and all those sort of things. So those are probably my top three.
Yeah. And when do you journal?
Mostly in the evening, and from there, I've kind of like adapted the process overall. Give a shout out. Taylor Pearson has a really good productivity course, and I took that years ago now, and Taylor and I are still friends, and I've sort of adapted his model and added more things. So usually I'll try to, kind of like check boxes that I know need to be checked. So I'll ask myself about exercise and that sort of thing. And then also just tasks that I got done and things that I've learned and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
planning the next day.
Yeah. Look, I'm just looking at my phone now, but I use the app called Done, Done,
Cool.
and it's fantastic like that. It basically, it's got the little, what you haven't finished during the day. So you can just go in and it ticks off, and then you can create streaks. And there's so many times that I'm thinking, I just couldn't be bothered exercising today, etc. And then, it's sitting there. And I'm like, I've got to get the streak. I've had 31 days of exercise in a row. I've got to get it. So I find something like that hugely beneficial. So
yeah, just one more thought on that. It's funny. Like I used to do something more like that. And for me personally, I found it to be kind of fun or more like effective to do a negative streak, where it's like, I can miss a day. I don't want to miss 2 days. I don't want to create a negative, right? So it's like,
yeah,
okay, I fell off. I didn't, whatever, exercise or something. And then, but I don't want to do that twice in a row. Right. So I think, and if you're just getting started with it, maybe you have like a longer negative streak. It's like, okay, it's been 3 days since I've exercised. I don't want to make the streak any longer, So
yeah.
I guess it depends on your disposition. Yeah.
True. And you can actually have negative habits as well. So you can create the
Right.
flip in that app. And
Right.
you just talked about deep work just quickly. Are you someone that, works to, the Pomodoro technique, certain time, or you just allocate the morning, for example, to work on deep work?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like a lot of my effectiveness comes from trying to figure out what are the Pomodoro tasks that I can complete, because I feel like a lot of my work is sales related for the business, which tends to, unless you're building a proposal or something like that, tends to not be as deep worky, as other things. So that's always what I'm trying to think about. Like, what are those sorts of tasks that are going to be worth using a Pomodoro on? But yeah, to answer your question, I definitely love that technique, and it's useful.
Yeah, excellent. So the next section's the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about, and why?
Yeah, and I wish I was more active with charities, because there isn't one organization right now. But I think one cause that I try to help out with, and casually in different ways, is just trying to make entrepreneurship more accessible. I think that there's, in a lot of ways, like Silicon Valley and these big companies have sort of rarefied entrepreneurship and made it for people that are really good at coding, or that are like insanely intelligent, or have like crazy, amounts of confidence and all these things. And I don't think that has to be the case. So as much as I can, like, I like to talk to people at early stages and see how I can help and all that good stuff. And in terms of community, jujitsu, like especially here in New York, has just been the most fun and diverse group of people I've ever encountered. We have, all races, all genders, cops, criminals, every walk of life, Wall Street guys, plumbers, etc. So that's definitely a community I'm into. Yep.
Yeah, and do you still practice that now that you can't do it in
Um,
person?
yeah, it's been tougher now with the pandemic and everything. But in small groups, in responsible ways, I've tried to.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine. Well, it depends. Over here, at one stage, you had to wear a mask even outdoors. So
Yeah.
activities like jiu-jitsu became difficult. But I used to always love when I traveled and I could, watch someone do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like you said, it would be a highlight if you're on a beautiful beach and next minute, there's a group of people that are doing it. It's well, I found it therapeutic to watch. I'm assuming it's even better when you're doing it, but it was very therapeutic.
Yeah. Therapeutic is what you need to fix yourself up after, but yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like I guess it was kind of formed on a beach, but in the US, it's mostly just like a gym thing because of the weather and everything. But that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Something you can do in Oz. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I just want to mention a charity that I'm passionate about. It's called the Purple House, and my book, Build, Live, Give. All the proceeds of that go to the Purple House, and also the portion of my total funds of my business go to the Purple House. You can find out more at purplehouse.com.au. So the last section is the rapid fire section, where I'll ask you some questions and get some quick, rapid responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Yeah, I think the main one. I'm a big like low information diet kind of guy, and it's not right for everybody. I get yelled at by my mom a lot for not knowing what's going on in the world, but that's been helpful for me. Is just limiting information, treating information like food. You don't eat crap endlessly. You have to. You're careful. Ideally, you're careful about what you eat. So that's big for me. I think another has just been reading older books, reading things that have kind of stood the test of time. Especially now, it's like I either want to read things that are old and have stood the test of time, or I want to read something that's brand new and like a really fresh take on what's going on. But like everything in the middle, I'm just not as interested in anymore, which is something I could talk a lot more about. And then I think the third one has just been, kind of like almost like constantly testing the right cadence of communication with across the board, with our team, with clients, with prospects, so I think that there's a lot of things changing. We've always been remote, so it hasn't been as disruptive to us personally, but regardless, we're interfacing with the rest of the world. And I think there's a lot of like, testing that's being done. So it's a kind of a moving target. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's kind of what's on my radar these days.
That's cool. Now, this next one, the next couple it's a sip of a beer. Okay, so the rapid fire. So the next one is technology. So what's a piece of technology you couldn't run your business without?
Yeah, the CRM. For us, it's Streak. I think all of these things have their own pros and cons and idiosyncrasies. But if you're on Gmail, I think what's cool about it is, it all lives in the email. So an email kind of ends up, like we've talked about, it kind of ends up becoming the nerve center. So there's lots of things that I like about it. So and it tells me things all the time that would be hard to live without, like just how long people are staying in each stage of our funnel, and where we need to put our attention, that sort of thing. So that's probably the biggest. Beyond that, we're not super techy, in as much as people might think. I think that in B2B, you can definitely over automate. So that's one thing we're always thinking about. But I use Evernote. That's kind of where I journal. So that's big for me. The G Suite. And there's probably other things, better proposals, like that a lot for the proposal side of things. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, look, I use all of those. And the last question is the big question, and that's why I leave it at the end. What impact do you want to leave on the world?
Yeah, it's a big question. I hate to give you a cop out because it's kind of a tie back to what I was talking about earlier, but I think it's making entrepreneurship more accessible to more of the world, to more people. And I think that word might have to change. It might even go beyond just literally owning a business. I think it could be more about entrepreneurial qualities and stuff. But I think that's now.
Great. And look, you can also hear Dan on his podcast. And I know I've listened, he interviews some amazing people, the Digital Agency Growth podcast. So look that up wherever you listen to podcasts, and give a shout out to Dan that you heard him on this one. So it's been fantastic having you on, Dan. I think you've got a very relaxed style that works well with relationships in a world where, yes, we are bombarded with a lot of sales messages, which, let's be honest, I often say to someone, you're sending it out, but would you receive that? And so often people say no. So I think your style is refreshing. Like you said, you want to zig when everyone else is zagging. And it was great to have you on the show. And you can find more about Dan at Sales Schema, which is SCHEMA.com. So Dan, absolute pleasure having you on today.
Likewise, Paul. Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye. I really enjoyed that interview with Dan. He's so relaxed, and you can see how his style works really well versus all the noise and the constant spam that you probably get on email and LinkedIn like everyone else does. So you can get the full show notes on the episode. So they're all there. I know you might have taken some notes, but the show notes are there. I'd love to know your key takeaways, and so would Dan. So why don't you even take a screenshot of the episode and mention the key things that you learn out of this. Dan would love you for it. Also, you can find more out about Dan at Sales Schema. So it's SCHEMA.com, and also share. So if you know someone that's really struggling, there may be an agency owner or any business struggling with leads, I think there's some great value here. Please share it with them. Also, if you want to build a great pipeline of leads outside of referrals, why don't you go to my free live masterclass that's going to be on the 27th of Feb, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/sales. Please take action to build, live, and give.
Thanks for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please share it and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.